Brilliant. Well, we're up to the top of the hour, and we're going to kick off the webinar. How to improve first contact resolution, which I think is a topic very much of the moment, as we've seen a whole trend in metrics moving from customer satisfaction, net promoter, customer effort score, and now the most popular one on the books that I see is first contact resolution. So it'll be quite interesting to see what measures we can do to improve first contact resolution. So I'd like to introduce to you our two speakers. Peter Massey from Bud. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Jonty. And
Peter, you're going to be talking through a range of techniques about how to improve first contact resolution, and also you're looking at, as I understand it, sort of where does the first contact start?
Yes, the first contact is one thing. I'll talk a little bit about no contact resolution and maybe first look resolution. I'll introduce those concepts.
Brilliant. Well, we're going to have normal top tips and questions for the audience. We're going to jump to Devon on the news desk, who'll be able to take us through those. And also delighted to be joined by a regular panelist of ours, Tim Pickard from New Voice Media.
Hi, Jonty.
Tim. And you're going to be talking through some of the technology angles that first contact resolution can be helped.
Yeah, so some of the issues around first contact resolution, some of the ways in which companies can tackle that, some technology around that as well. So I think there's a broad mix of things that I want to talk about.
Brilliant. And if you're not already logged into our chat room, it's callcenterhelper.com/chat. You can leave your tips and your questions in there. And there is a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates for the best tip. And Peter, I'll be asking you to pick the best tip, and we'll announce that winner on Twitter around 3 o'clock this afternoon. There is a replay available later on, and a white paper will be going out afterwards. So logged into the chat room, you can get the webinar slides on this link here in the top of the page there. Download webinar slides, and you can carry on a chat with the audience. So what I'd like to do is start off with a poll saying, how do you measure first contact resolution in your organization, or do you measure it? So the answers are, and you can select all that apply, no repeat calls within a given time frame. Do you measure first contact resolution by repeat contact reasons in your CRM or customer data system? Do you ask the customer if you've resolved the call? Or do you use a post-call survey? If there's any other methods you use, if you'd like to drop those into the chat room, or do you not measure first contact resolution at all? So if you'd just like to vote on there. Peter, which one do you think is going to be the strong contender here?
It's interesting, actually. The don't measure one is scoring quite highly. We measured this quite a few years ago, at the time when Best Services, No Service, the book came out in, 7 years back. And at that point, actually, a lot of people were not recording. I think what has happened in that time is that CRM systems got better at recording contact reasons. Companies focus on that more, so I'm sure we'll see that with a good showing.
Yeah, so let's have a look at the results there. Here we are. Yeah. Yes, indeed, as you predicted, Peter. 37% repeat contact reasons in the CRM system, followed by no repeat calls within a given time frame, which is always a tricky one to do. 25% post-call survey, 11% ask the customer, and 32% of the audience don't measure it. So some quite interesting ones there. Tim, what's your view on repeat calls within a time period?
Well, as you say, that can be tricky because I think all companies are different, all businesses are different. That time frame needs to be set very carefully because customers may use your goods or services relatively rarely, and therefore, if they go outside the time frame, they're not a repeat. Whereas, in fact, from their perspective, they are a repeat. So, I think it's a tricky one, and I think it needs to be handled carefully. The other thing I would countenance, I think, is that it's great to be able to manage your own metrics, plus also look at what your customers are saying, because if there's a big divergence between the two, then there's something going on there that you need to look at more carefully.
Okay, well, I'd like to drill down a little bit more into repeat calls, and I'd like to ask the audience in 1 or 2 words, what is your biggest cause of repeat calls. So if you'd just like to enter that in the chat room, what is your biggest cause of repeat calls?
You're taking my my thunder, John T.
Well, I'll have a look at this. So Kurt says it's lack of knowledge. Katie says it's non-response, I guess not getting back to people as you say so. Eric says it's technical failures. Kate says not giving the next steps in the process. Ursula says it's lack of information. Lisa says no feedback status update provided. So I guess making it a two-way street quite important there. Managing timescale says Brownie. Karen says not managing expectations and ringbacks. Bass says questions about status. Joe says insufficient troubleshooting on failed products. Delay in follow-up says David. Peter, we're seeing a lot of ones here about lack of communication or lack of ownership. Does that surprise you?
No, not at all. I mean, if you look at the classic, you know, Amazon, where's my stuff? You know, people having to get in touch is often down to lack of communication about what's going to happen, as I think it was Katie said in there, and that this management of perception and simplicity of communication, you know, learning the process that the business does. If you're a frequent user of a particular business, you get used to how things work, but many people aren't in that situation. So no surprises there, actually, Jonty.
And Tim, there's quite a number about status updates of not keeping the customer informed in the whole process. This surely is an area where technology has a role to play.
Absolutely. I mean, lots of, well, so that could be done out of a different channel or a different, you know, out of band. It doesn't have to be a call. That could be done through text, through email, through a different channel, very effectively, or it could be done systemically. So, you know, look at some way of managing that process differently in your business. And actually, I've got a very good example of that when I get to speak.
Okay, well, we'll wait to with bated breath for that. So we're going to jump across to Peter Massey, who's going to take us through some ideas on how to improve first contact resolution. So Peter, do you want to take us through your thoughts?
Sure, yeah, I'll take you through the sort of dozen slides here at a fair old pace. I think just for background, you introduced this, Jonty, at the beginning. What our passion is how do we stop doing dumb things to our customers and our people. And people say you shouldn't have negatives in your mantra, if you like. But for us, this is the kind of overriding thing that when we go into contact centres or listen to calls and so on and so forth, you just hear a lot of people wasting their lives, you know, having to make the calls. I always think of the list that you have in the morning where you've got all your work things to do, and then down the corner there's a whole load of things to have to call up about this bill or that bill, or as we were joking about before we came online, you know, how to get internet to work, and life's too short to do some of these things. So what's quite important is that we as businesses can understand those frustrations and look for the opportunities to make it simpler for people. So do you want to move to the next slide, Glenn, please, Devon? So I often joke these days that I'm no longer a sort of futurologist. I'm more of a historian, I think, in the contact center industry. It's, so many of the things that we see today we've seen before, and they've not necessarily changed. They come in waves. But 7 years ago, we brought out this book, The Best Service is No Service, which my US and Aussie colleagues wrote, very much around the Amazon approach to how we reduce customer effort, how do we remove all the unnecessary things that customers don't want to have to do, and how do we make it easy for them online. And of course, a whole part of this was about the growth model that Amazon had developed, whereby by removing all the hygiene factors, they were able to concentrate on being predictive and using analytics to help customers do things they wanted to do. What we're seeing today is that, and I mentioned this in the intro, is that we're seeing now the need to bridge the gap between the traditional contact center industry and the very sophisticated tools available to both digital marketeers and digital service operations. And that sweet spot between the two is really, I think, the focus of my attention today, and I'll try and bring that out. So if you want to go to the next slide, please, Devon. So the first thing, really quite important to me is about this number first. When can you tell the first contact is? So if I'm me and I look at how many contacts I have, I might say it's 4. If you're you and you're the business, you may say 3. Does it really matter? Will we ever get the number right? Probably not. I was with an insurance company the other day, and they were looking at some improvements they'd made about the notification of no claims discounts, which was causing them a lot of secondary contacts. And actually, when I looked at the website, I found that I could look at 17 things before I'd even go near a contact. So this first contact, I just want to move the angle a little bit on this and say, okay, let's think from a digital point of view and say how many things are we looking at. So if we go to the next slide, this is an example from the delivery industry. So is the text to me a contact? I'm not having to make a contact, but they're contacting me. They're predicting what I might want to know. They're predicting that I might want to change the delivery, and they're giving me some options to do that. And if I click through on this link, it will know it's me. It will show me where my parcel is, where the van is. It'll show you where my house is, and it'll show me how far away something is. So this is saying, actually, we don't want you to have to go to the effort of contacting us. And for me, as a customer, this is my first look rather than my first contact. And so that first look is extremely positive and very, very productive for me as a customer. So we go to the next slide. Then not every first look can be quite so predictive. So following the theme of delivery, I just did a quick search in eBay to look for delivery options. So how could I take delivery of something from eBay? And in fact, the screen that you can see on here then came up with quite random information, nothing to do with what I was looking for. It was various things that came up that must have had delivery in them somewhere, but it wasn't really useful at all. So my first look wasn't in any way a resolution. If we look at the next slide where we did the same thing with Amazon, actually I only got as far as typing in deliv. So can we bring that next slide up then? Here we go. So I got as far as typing deliv. I didn't even get as far as asking about delivery options, but you can already see that Amazon had predicted what I might want to look at and brought up some things that would be useful. And in fact, if I clicked on those, I actually found a number of very helpful things that would get me to where I wanted to go. So in many ways, we could call this sort of a shift from first contact resolution to first look resolution, or we could say it's no contact resolution. It's actually about avoiding that contact at all. And this is certainly what we see in all the legendary companies that we go into, is this prediction and ability to avoid contact, to make the first looks work well, is more important. Now, I bring this out because I think this is where the emphasis is for people who are working in digital. I'm not sure it's the emphasis for everybody who's working in a contact center. So first contact, no contact, interesting question. So let's go to the next slide. Going back to the history of this stuff, it's not new, and this stuff has been around for a long time, but this is one of the closed loops that we see in. There's a great deal of respect for what the customer knows. There's a great deal of respect for what the frontline staff know. And the organization is geared up to actually listen to those things, to use data structures to bring out of those listenings what changes they ought to make, and they make those changes to the operations, be that contact center or logistics or retail, and they make those changes in such a way that the customer and the frontline staff can notice a difference. And this closed loop is what we see at the heart of really good organizations, be they digital or contact center, in improving those contact resolutions. So let's move forward a slide. The opposite of resolution to me, I like this concept, comes from our first book of snowballs. And in this sense, a snowball is, if you're making a big snowball, you start with a little snowball, you roll it down the hill, it collects more and more snow as it goes, and it disproportionately grows. And to me, that's like the emotional impact you have on a customer when you don't get first call resolution. You actually have this kind of frustration that grows and grows. And if you have to make 2 or 3 going on for, sometimes 16 or 20 calls around, an insurance claim or trying to get your internet to work or whatever it may be, emotionally that snowball is getting bigger and bigger, even disproportionately to the number of contacts that you make. So the concept of melting snowballs I'd like to put across, and that's that many staff on the front line know the type of problems that occur to customers, and they know the sorts of things that are going to cause this snowballing. So a great example is, a customer in the telco industry, in the first 30 days, they can't get the connectivity to work on their smartphone, so they'll have a problem, they'll call in for various technical calls. When the first bill arrives and they've not been using the service, the billing query will start to rise up, and before you know it, you've got quite a big problem, and that can occur in TV subscription. It can occur in the first 30 days for many people. So the issue is not to ignore that and just get better at handling the calls. The issue is to be able to say, customers who had this happen to them and that happen to them are going to go into a snowball. Let's not treat them in the normal way. Let's give them a different service. So whether that is to allow the first member of staff to spend a lot more time with them, or whether it's put them into a special unit so they can be handled better, but don't treat it the same. Predict that that's going to happen and treat it very differently. So if we go to the next slide.
And I guess, Peter, the other challenge is that it's not just the emotion of the customer snowballing. It's actually quite often you get call after call after call. And so if we're just measuring first contact resolution, we may miss the fact that actually what we might be wanting to do is reduce it from, say, 8 contacts down to, say, 2 or 3. And if we're just saying, oh, that one wasn't in a first contact, we're sort of missing, if you like, some of the repeats.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think you do see this kind of snowballing in both the physical nature of the the number of calls as well as the emotion that goes with it. And so I think one of the themes I want to bring out again is that when you work in the digital industry, you see this prediction, the use of hypotheses, of test and learns, of techniques to understand and learn what's going on for your customers, to understand what the early symptoms look like, and then to start treating customers differently. Whether that's going back up into the website and making the FAQs clearer, putting the prompts in the right places, making the search engine work better, or whether it's actually treating the caller different when they come in, both of these techniques, all of these techniques, feel much, much better to the customer than actually leaving it to go through a resolution cycle. So prediction, I think, is a key theme that you should look for in your contact center, and looking at how you use prediction to improve both no contact resolution and first contact resolution. So we just skip over the slide again. Okay, I think the last point, John, I just wanted to pull out, and this came from a discussion we had, was when is something resolved? And that it's only resolved really when the customer says it's resolved. And I can completely sympathize with the poll that we did before, that it's not appropriate to necessarily go back to a customer after everything's finished and say, is everything resolved? But what one can do is to look very carefully at the way in which you measure resolution internally and make sure that it doesn't come across as annoying to the customer. So this is an example of a tech support call whereby if something doesn't happen, they call it resolved, whereas I'm calling in and saying something is happening. That to tell me that it's been resolved is not very useful when you can still see the problem occurring. So I think, again, we've got to be quite careful here about not only the physical number of calls, but what the emotional content of the call, of the contact is, in that way. So let's just skip over then to the final slide. So this is a question really that I think is worth looking at. If we're looking at first points of contact, first resolution, that's the sort of thing I expect to see from contact centers. But digital businesses that start up online, not necessarily new businesses, but businesses that are really thinking this way, are thinking of the contact center as the last point of contact. So they're concentrating very hard on this no contact resolution and on first look resolution, rather than leaving it purely to what's going to happen after we've got the contacts. And this is a question really about where you put your resources. So you can spend a lot of time chasing first contact resolution, or you can spend time avoiding the need for that first contact resolution at all. And I think that's one of the really interesting questions that strategic managers have got in the contact center industry today. So with that, Jonty, I'll hand back to you and say thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's some great food for thought there, particularly about should we be having the contact in the first place. I certainly see a lot of websites where frequently asked questions are 10 rather obvious questions, where there must be hundreds of customer service type questions that people are typing into Google trying to look for, can't get it, then have to call up to find out that information. So quite fascinating. Well, we're going to jump across to a poll now, and that really ties up on Peter's point about agents marking problems as resolved. So I'd just like to, it's not a poll, it's an audience question. Just ask the audience, what is it that you do to stop agents from marking problems as resolved in the database? I think 1/3 of our audience are using reason codes in the database. So I'd just like to understand what it is that people are doing to stop agents marking problems as resolved when perhaps they haven't been. Good example I had recently where I called in to report a fault, and the agent said, oh, I've entered that into the system, so I've marked it as resolved. I thought, no, the fault's not resolved. There's no more the agent can do. And we had a long conversation for about 7 minutes about why it should be marked as resolved. He didn't say because it makes his statistics look better. So I just wonder what people in the audience are doing. While we're going through to that, what I'd like to do now is jump across to the news desk, and where we've got Devon managing our news desk, looking at the top tips and questions coming through from the audience. So Devon, do you want to tell us what's been happening in the chat room?
Yep, so we've got a busy chat room today. We're going to begin with a tip from Marion that says, engage with the customer and really listen to the problem. In that case, you can really solve it. We've got another tip now. When it switches. We are improving our CRM so that the back office enter update notes that automatically email to customers each morning, but then they are also visible via the web to all if they are raising a request. This prevents them raising it again. They can also track status updates. We've got a question now. How can you balance first contact resolution alongside a strict average handling time target within your team? We are currently looking into adding more structure and processes for our agents to follow and measuring the time taken for the processes. Peter?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one actually, and it comes up a lot, is this kind of, if you allow people more time to resolve the problem, then your handle time has gone up. But if you look at the total handle time across the number of calls or repeat calls that you would get otherwise and the dissatisfaction, it is far more effective. However, if you're running a contact center and you're already being measured on these kind of handle time targets, not necessarily the agent, but the whole center has only got so much resource, it's a fairly scary moment when you make these shifts across to say, actually it's okay on this type of call to come out of handle time measures and to take the time it requires to do the job properly and make sure the customer resolution occurs. You have to do that, I think, in a test and learn environment. Rather than, big bang, what you do is start to do some small tests with small groups of agents and prove the numbers, prove that actually by resolving the query properly, not only do your scores obviously go up, but actually the total amount of handle time across the one call with the one longer call is much better than multiple calls which go wrong. And you can put the data together in test and learn mode and then roll it out with some confidence and with the backing of the organization.
Brilliant, thank you for that, Peter. We've got another tip now that says, Some of our first contact resolution failure is due to a lack of understanding of the end service, so we have sent out our team managers on day in the live training so they understand the services better and can inform the customers of the whole experience and SLAs. I think we've got an opinion now. What we are seeing is that the more we strive for first contact resolution, the more the average handling time increases. Alongside this, the agents with the best first contact resolution rate are often the agents with the highest AHT. Tim, do you agree with this?
So I think that sort of talks a little bit to Peter's point earlier on, which is average handle times are likely to go up if you're focusing on first contact resolution per call, but I think that probably averages out over a period of time, so that makes sense. The other thing is that I think your NPS or customer effort scores are going to improve if you're focusing on first contact resolution rather than average handle time. So there is a trade-off to be had. I think there's a couple of techniques I think that can be used for this. So measurement and how you measure in terms of the time frames over which you measure those average handle times, I think is probably going to be really critical. And the other thing is, as Peter mentioned very briefly, which is something I want to talk about, which is try and segment the groups a little bit. So if you can try and segment some of those groups and understand, actually these calls are going to take longer because they are more complex or for whatever reason it is, then your average handle time for that type of call may be longer in any case. So it's kind of unreasonable to put that in to your total average handle time when you know those calls are going to be taking longer.
Can I just comment as well, actually, on there, is that normally what you see is once this settles down is that the handle time for good resolution often comes down. So this is quite a surprising result, and it suggests to me that not all the agents have been trained how to give the resolution, and hence why the higher handle time is there. So I would suspect that this needs a little bit more investigation, and that we'd probably find that there's a little bit more training required for the agents or something else that they require in order to give the resolution.
Thank you for those responses. We've got another tip now. It says, we're looking to prevent contacts that lead to escalations like non-working website products and financial issues. I think we've got time for 2 more tips. We are looking at our experience maps and bringing in some soft skills mindset training. That's by Ruth. And finally, we look at the records of the people each month that have contacted us the most and review to see how many we could have stopped them, needed to have so many contacts. We are looking to see if it was how we dealt with the call or if the website was not giving them the help they needed.
Perfect.
John T, back to you.
Wonderful, thank you very much indeed. So we're going to now jump across to a poll, and we're going to be looking at one of the big things a lot of people in first contact resolution say is looking at the number of repeat calls and driving down the number of repeat calls. So in your organization, what is the repeat call most likely to be caused by? Is it caused by an agent, the customer, the web form or the website and contact center systems not being joined up? Is it a process failure, or is it other departments need to be involved? You can vote for more than one on here, so if you'd just like to vote on that, and the votes coming through. I think probably other departments, Tim, are going to be quite high in this one.
Well, there is a cause and effect, obviously, in some instances. So, if you're a product company, for example, or if you have a service that has a problem with it, then that's going to show up further down the line, and that's going to appear in your customer services area. So there's definitely some knock-on effects that I think people are feeling.
So let's have a look here. Quite fascinating results here. 55% are other departments. The highest is process failures within the organization. 68%, staggeringly high.
Interesting.
High number there. 55% is down to the agent. So it looks like we need to be investing much more on agent training. 29% the customer. 18% the web form and website not joined up. Some of these numbers, Peter, surprise me. They're quite high.
Yeah, I'm not overly surprised. When we do an analysis, we do this thing called a value irritant analysis. You know, what's irritating customers and what's irritating the business. We'll often find that something like 60 to 80% of all the contact is unnecessary if everything was done right. So quite often we, the organisation, are causing the customer to have to call us because of our policies or procedures or processes or things we send out they don't understand. So I'm not surprised the numbers are high. What is a little surprising, I think, is that the website and contact centre systems are not joined. And that, if it's true that everybody's got their web and contact centre systems joined up these days, that would be brilliant. I think that's probably a little low, or maybe just represents the what we can see of the problem. But process failure and other departments, absolutely. So many contact centres now are well run. People are analysing what's going wrong. They're putting right the things they can put right. But when a process or another department is outside of their control, that's where you really need strong leadership in a contact centre to go into the organisation and really join the dots up, because that's the big problem that nearly all contact centres face.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's go across and have a look at an example of both the process failure and other departments getting it wrong. And that's one of a story that is in the just popped up in the news. I think it broke last night. We've just been able to put this into the slide deck, so we don't have this on your decks in your offices. Scottish Power have been banned from sales calls until complaints are cleared. They've actually had a suspension for 12 days from selling. We covered this story a little while ago, and back in November, when the Ofgem warned them that they might face this, and surprisingly they haven't put it right. So Tim, what's your take on this one? What do you think they're going to do about it?
I think this is really interesting, actually, because what they're doing, they're taking it on the chin. Obviously, I think you have to, but they're taking their 500 telesales agents and they're putting them in the customer contact centre, which I think is a really interesting and quite a bold move, actually.
May not improve customer service.
It may not improve customer service, but it will certainly improve the understanding of those salespeople about what happens when things are missold or or oversold potentially, and there is a knock-on effect of that. And the people that feel that pain are the people who are in customer services. So I think it's a really interesting. Move. But also I think the regulators are getting more teeth, and they're using those teeth. So we've seen in this environment, but also in cold calling environments as well. There's a greater regulation there and greater powers to fine. So I think all of that is very interesting.
So certainly it seems to be closing the loop between customer service and sales that we've been aware of for many years, but I think it's now becoming mainstream. So we're going to jump across to Tim Pickard now, who's going to share us some ideas about how technology has a role to play within first contact resolution. So Tim, do you want to put your slides up and take us through your ideas?
Yes, thanks, John T. So good afternoon, everybody. Let me add my welcome to this call. I want to first sort of think about why is this metric so important? Why is first contact resolution so important versus some of the other metrics that we have out there, non-talk time, average handle time. John T, you mentioned a few at the top of the call. And for me, I think it's the differential between an internal focused efficiency metric, which average handle time would be, and a customer-centric metric. So first contact resolution is much more about the customer, and it much more closely aligns to customer experience and therefore impacts on your Net Promoter Score, for example, or customer effort or other type of score that you might be using from a customer experience perspective. Interesting to note, though, that first contact resolution and NPS do not have a direct relationship. So your first contact resolution is one element of your NPS score, and your FCR can go down. It means that your using up your customer goodwill credits. And I think this is something that Peter was referring to when you talked about the snowball. You're using up that goodwill, which is very hard to acquire in the first place. But at some point that goodwill will disappear and you'll see your NPS fall very sharply. So I think there's that kind of delayed reaction as you build up and build up and build up, and then at that point where NPS drops like a stone. So I don't think that relationship is absolutely fixed, but it's certainly one element of the NPS score. So I'm going to talk about early life routing, about repeat contact, customer context, and cross-channel contact, and all of these things we have touched upon in the call so far. So I'm looking to add some new context to some of those topics. So let's talk about new customers first of all. When you've just signed or acquired a new product or signed up a new service, or your service provider has just upgraded that service from V2 to V3 and all the login screens have changed and all the screens have changed. At that point, you can expect a series of new customer type questions, and these could be very specific, they could be very detailed, they could take quite a long time, and this is what I was referring to earlier in the call about segmenting some of the calls and looking at average handle time across some of those customer segments, because new customer calls may take longer, they may require more patience and more in-depth handling, and therefore to look at that and measure that as an average handle time against a more routine call is not really measuring apples with apples. And I think the other thing is that these are best handled by a specialist team. So wouldn't it be nice if you could automatically recognize, look up in my CRM, this customer's just acquired this new product, we're going to put them through to the team that has the skills to take that call and manage that call in the appropriate way. The other thing I think that is important to do is to let them know you know. So your message might say something like, we understand that you are a new customer and that you just acquired this product. We're going to route you through to our initial customer services team. For example, we're making people see that their call is being handled differently right from the outset. So I think, again, that's quite an important element of this. Self-service IVRs is something that can be used in this context as well. So if you have an activation key, for example, so if you're trying to set up a new service and you have an activation key, you can use an IVR to do that. So you can get the customer to input a customer number or a code, and then automatically play that activation key to them. So there's a way of managing that outside of a live agent discussion or a live contact discussion.
Certainly early life customers are something I don't see a lot of in the groups we deal with. It tends to be around a problem area rather than sort of looking at the customer lifetime, and that's a very good idea.
I mean, it probably makes sense to in some instances. It may not make sense in all instances, but certainly we have some customers who do that, who segment their customers in that way, and then manage their calls, route their calls automatically based on the age of the customer. So repeat contacts. I think step one, identify repeat causes. So how often is an issue arising or occurring? And the Pareto principle rules here. 80% of calls probably come from 20% of causes. So identifying that 20% is the first step. And you may find that comes down to 5 or 10 issues that are causing 80% of your repeat calls. So being able to rigorously understand that and then individually resolve those issues is going to be very important. Step 2, quantify the value of resolving them, and then start at the one that has the most impact. So as you kind of rigorously go through this process, make sure that you're starting at the top, if you like. I've also thought about this in terms of systemic versus non-systemic issues. So we talked about processes, and one of the polls you talked about processes, and I think systemic issues are can be very difficult problems to solve. You've got business process change, you've potentially got political issues within the organization that you need to tackle, and sometimes these can just be too hard, and companies can go, yes, we know we have that problem, we know the cost of that problem, but actually the cost of solving it is even greater, so we're going to leave it. Having said that, we have a customer, DPD, who's a delivery company, have a great example of how they met that challenge. So they were actually the first people to introduce 1-hour delivery slots for their customers. So rather than have to wait half a day or a day, you could choose your hour. And there's a problem, there's a systemic problem that they have caused. So 90% of their calls were, I've been waiting here since 9 o'clock, it's 5 o'clock, where's my package, whatever it is. So they changed the rules on that. But also they changed the rules on, well, what happens if I've chosen my hour, but actually I've got to go out in that hour and I'm going to change my hour? Well, you can do that through their IVR. So actually, a lot of their repeat calls have gone entirely as a result of understanding that, changing their business processes, and setting up a completely new system to handle that. Customer satisfaction through the roof. Great change to their business, real leadership in their industry. A situational issue or a non-systemic issue might be a scenario. Now, this may or may not have happened to me. Imagine the congestion charge in London, and it has been set up incorrectly, so that even though you've paid your congestion charge on a particular route, motorists are still being charged, or fined, I should say, for not having paid their congestion charge. Now, that is going to cause some very angry phone calls, and it's going to be very costly because all those fines are going to have to be reversed, etc., etc. So we talked a little bit about Scottish Power and their telesales people being used as customer services agents. Well, I'm going to introduce the concept that economists talk about, which is externalities, which is where one group does something that affects positively or negatively another group. Now, you might think about a farmer being positively impacted by a local beekeeper because it pollinates his crops. That's a positive impact. Well, a negative impact might be your service engineer who's incorrectly set up the camera system so that a lot of motorists are getting fined when they shouldn't have done. Now, wouldn't it be great if we then said, well, I'll tell you what, in order to help you to expedite the process of fixing this, why don't you guys come and answer the calls so that you feel our pain? Because the pain is not felt by the people who have caused the pain. And I think that's a problem that is felt by a lot of people in the contact center industry. We're picking up a lot of the pain in our business because other things haven't been done correctly. So I think that's a novel approach to maybe helping to fix that problem. So customer context. This is really interesting, but also really important, because the more context you have about a customer call, the more you can manage that call appropriately. So do we know the activity history of this person as they come into the call? Do we know where they've been on the website, for example? Have they tried to fix this problem? Do we know what products they have? So all of that information together really gives you some context about the caller. And they may not have called you before. So this may be a new call, but you can collect that information about them. As Peter was saying, if you've joined up a lot of your systems, then you can collect a lot of that information prior to the call and have that context available to manage the call more effectively and therefore avoid repeat calls. Now, some agents do this automatically. They get it. Others, there are ways that we can help them to do that, and we can do that through technology by presenting all of that information. We can gamify good behavior, so we can look at ways that we can reward good behavior for agents. And the other thing is that I think we need to look in greater detail at first call resolution, or first contact resolution. We need to look at it by agent. So by doing that, we can say, okay, is this person taking longer than potentially they should for a particular issue? Is that a training issue? Is it something that we can coach accordingly so that we can manage that individual into a situation where they're managing those calls better? And the other thing about this, I think, is that seemingly small changes make a big difference. So if you, for example, reduce your average contact or your customer contacts from an average of 1.7 to 1.4, that's a 20% improvement. It doesn't sound like a great deal, but 20% the customer is going to notice that. So that makes a big difference at the customer end of the discussion. So how much does that that customer baggage, how much of that when they bring that into a call, does that matter? Well, CEB, we did a webinar with them a few weeks ago, and they presented this slide, which is based on research from just over 1,200 of their customers. It's a big part of the equation. So they estimated that 53% of the management of the call is on pre-interaction factors, the things that I just talked about that customers are bringing into that call, and 47% are based on live surface interaction factors. Now, to me, that's an amazing statistic, because if we just equip our agents with what's happening in real time, then they're losing the ability to manage the call. They're losing 50% of their ability to manage that call. So this is a really interesting slide, and actually it's a really interesting concept. And I would encourage people, if they're interested, to go and look at the replay on our website. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about cross-channel and the importance of cross-channel, because as I said earlier on, as millennials come through, as people become more engaged with multiple channels, then this becomes more important. And around 50% of callers have visited your website before they make a call. So I think first call resolution is probably a thing of the past, because by the time someone calls, it's not their first contact. Right? They're going to have contacted you more than once in their eyes. So it's very important to be able to aggregate that and to put those things together. And we can do that. We can route according to what customers have done. So we know if they've been on a particular page on our website, that might be an FAQ, it might be a knowledge base around a particular product or service. We can route based on that. We can understand that and route them through to an agent who can help them with that. Or we could post different phone numbers on the website, for example. So then it would become very easy to route those numbers through to different agents and different queues. And I think it's interesting if we look at this overall stat in terms of the numbers that we're talking about here. So 25% of consumers use 1 or 2 channels, 52% of consumers use 3 or 4, and 22% use 5 or more. So this is becoming something that we need to manage from a technology point of view, but not just manage those channels, but manage the context around that. So be able to present that information to a customer service agent that says, this customer has come from your website or a live chat or an email, and this is the context of that now live call. And I think being able to manage that context is really critically important, and something that without which it becomes very hard to manage that live service interaction. So to summarize, early life routing, I think that's an interesting way of segmenting the calls or the contacts that you're getting. And I think, again, it's a way of maybe segmenting the average handle times to look at that in a slightly different way as well. Understanding repeat contacts and resolving them over time. Understanding customer situations and their prior experience also gives insight to the agent into how they should manage calls. And having visibility across channels and the context across channels to be able to understand what the customer has been doing, how much effort potentially they have made to resolve a particular issue. And that gives an enormous amount of help to the customer service agent to be able to respond appropriately to that call.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Tim. I think there's some interesting thoughts in there. Certainly, customer baggage is quite an interesting one. On a recent webinar, it sort of someone said we're not really in the business of customer engagement management. It's customer engagement memory management. As at the end of the day, what is the amount of baggage that the customer feels they have? and if we positively impact that. So it's more about can we create a happy memory for the overall experience. It went
can we
wrong.
take some of their baggage away from them in that experience?
Wrong, but we could put it right. Absolutely. So that's great. Well, I'm going to drill down into some of the technology, and it'd be interesting to see who's been implemented different bits of the technology that Tim has been talking about. So I'd just like to put a poll up. Does your contact center do any or all of these things? Do you track the number of repeat contacts? This is the number of times where they interacted perhaps with your website, not just phoning the call center, rather the number of repeat calls. Can you route repeat callers through to the front of the queue? Can you automatically link web visitors to callers? So as they're coming off the website, they can come through to you. Can you route callers through to the last agent they spoke to? Or can you do none of the above? So I'm guessing none of the above is probably going to come up quite high on this one. So let's have a look at the results that we've got coming back from the poll here, and I'm going to share the results up on the screen. Well, as predicted, none of the above is the winning category in here. So I think there's probably some investment in technology needed to improve repeat contacts. The top one there is tracking the number of repeat contacts, not just the number of repeat calls that people have got. 10% of people are able to route calls to the last agent they spoke to. I don't know if that's just using a personal DDI number, call me back on this number, which is quite a common one. Route repeat callers to the front of the queue, only 5%. And only 2% can actually link web visitors to callers, which seems a very, very low number, Tim. Is that in line with your thinking?
I mean, I think that seems low, but this is technology that is, it's coming to the fore now, and the ability to be able to track what people have been doing on your website, but then to connect them together is the really clever bit. Is to in real time to say this browser on your site has looked at these 3 pages and is now making a call. That's very valuable technology actually from a context point of view, and I think these are things that we are helping our customers with now. So that I'm not totally surprised that it's relatively low, and I'm interested actually if you want to put in the chat box, how useful would those things be for you in your business. So 60-odd% said they can't do those things, but would you like to do those things? Would those things be valuable to you? I think is an interesting question to answer as well.
Indeed. So if you'd like to put answers to that in the chat box, we're going to have a look at some of the top tips and questions coming through. So we're going back to Devon on the news desk. So Devon, what's been happening in the chat room?
We've got an opinion in from Claire, who says social media as a first contact is one that if you miss the opportunity, this can really snowball.
That really can snowball really quickly.
We've got another opinion in from Ruth that says the first 90 days is critical. I like the idea of a specific early life team and letting the customer know this.
Yeah, because I guess often we don't let the customer know we have an early life.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
We've got a tip in from Cameron. In terms of increasing FCR, we are implementing scripts and templates for the top 5 to 10 customer inquiries. The aim being that no matter which agent picks up the phone, the customer gets the same answer. This has worked well for us in the past.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Peter, what's your view on scripting for first contact resolution?
Well, it depends on the word scripting, which sometimes can be a bit emotive. But if you understand the top 10 things why customers get in touch, the true contact demand, and you train people how to triage that demand and to answer the 80-20 of the questions on there, it can't fail but to improve. And I think the other thing is as well, if you do that, you can also go back to your website and look at the visibility of the same thing. You know, can I see where's my parcel? How do I connect my phone? You know, the obvious things that people want should be visible in their words on the website, and they should be trained right the way through to the contact center as well. And if you do that analysis, it can have some quite dramatic effects on handle times and on overall workload.
Perfect, thank you. We've got another tip in from Ruth. We really need to get all the other departments to understand how much FCR impacts the business and the bottom line. Until they understand that, our process failures will continue. FCR is going to be big news for us over the next few months, and we'll be using Voice of Customer to help them to understand this.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I think process failures are probably as I talked about, they're probably the biggest thing. That if you can change that, you can really change first contact resolution. But they can be the hardest things to change, but with the biggest impact.
I think if I can add as well, for when you're trying to convince other departments, you've got to appeal to the head and the heart. So actually you want to try and get people to sit on the phones or record calls for them, put them in their car, you know, through the CD. Get them involved in some way if you can. And at the same time, they need to see the numbers. So they need to do not only the quantity of times this is happening, but when you do the maths behind it, you can add up the actual cost and impacts and show them both the emotive and the objective, and you can get a lot further that way.
Perfect, thank you. We've got another tip in now from Kate that says, we split out first contact resolution into different types so that we can see how often the call centre team can offer this without help from other departments and how often they have needed to gain support from other departments. This helps us to see how joined up the processes are.
I think that's very good.
We've got a final tip in now from Lisa. We're introducing web chat as part of our new telephony upgrade that will also depend heavily on IVR to provide and a signposting to the web for self-serve to support first-time resolution with no contact required to a call centre advisor. Back to you now, John T.
Okay, certainly that last one is a bit of a brave move to undertake, so it'll be interesting to know how that one goes. So yeah, we're just coming up to the top of the hour now. So just like if you could put it into the chat room, in one or two words, what did you like best about the webinar? If you could put that in, type that into the chat room. What did you like best about the webinar? Just a reminder, slides are available on Call Center Helper. If you go to callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars, and you get the slides from there. And you can also watch a replay of the webinar, which will be available probably within an hour on that, because I know a lot of you like to share this as a reference material with your team and with your management team. Still time to get to some of the other webinars in our series. And just finally like to thank our two presenters, to Peter Massey, who will just in a short while be picking the winner tip. So Peter, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I'll give you a call on the mobile to go through the winning tip. And also to Tim Pickard from New Voice Media, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John T.
And thank you to everyone in the audience, and we look forward to joining you on our webinar next week. Thanks very much. Bye-bye, everyone.